The face of a king who was born in a remote province of northern Greece, but whose name became renowned throughout the ancient world. The archaeologist who has brought this royal figure to light is Manolis Andronicus. For 50 years he has worked in the tiny Macedonian village of Vergina, where he has rediscovered a civilization lost to history. And in 1977, Andronicus made world headlines with the most spectacular archaeological finds made in Europe this century, hidden within this huge earth burial mound. The magnificent objects he discovered were produced by a civilization who came to dominate the whole of ancient Greece. Their royal symbol was the starburst. In 1989, after 12 more years of excavation at the site, Andronicus peers into another tomb. Put together, the evidence he has uncovered has overturned one of the most fundamental tenets of classical history, that the glories of Greek culture were only to be found to the south, around the ancient city-states like Athens. Macedonia, far away to the north, had been ignored as backward and underdeveloped because there was little historical evidence about the nature of Macedonian society. And so its sites remained buried and forgotten. Until in the 1850s, an adventurous French archaeologist, Léon Herzé, determined to travel beyond Mount Olympus. He journeyed north until he reached the tiny hamlet of Palatitsa, close to present-day Vergina. There he stumbled upon a ruined church, built from ancient stones and broken columns. What he found was intriguing, and investigating further around the church, he pieced together the outlines of a vast classical building. The ruins of Vergina clearly suggested that in the past, Macedonia had been more than merely a barbarian outpost. For what Herzé had found was a royal palace, surrounded by a buried city. 90 years later, Andronicus recognized the enormous significance of Herzé's original observations.
He realized the importance of the site. It's worth reading a quotation from his first book, who published in 1876. I read, "Will those who rake over the same ground after us wish to investigate the confusing debris to look for the lines of constructions buried below the ground? We earnestly hope so. If indeed there is a chance to solve the mystery that envelops the history of Macedonia, we are convinced that it lies in the hills of Palatitsa. Whatever the name of this unknown city, the importance of its ruins for Macedonia will be comparable to those of Bombay." This quotation, this sentence is really prophetic, because after 100 and so years, now the results of the excavations proved that this place was very, very important, and we knew very many things about the history and the culture of Macedonians.
The great importance of the site uncovered by Andronicus and the team he's brought together has transformed Vergina into a tourist attraction, and Andronicus himself into a well-known public figure.
Τι κάνει και λέω, καλά, ο πατράτης ο άλλος, ο πατράτης.
But in the early years, just after the war, things were very different. Then he worked virtually alone and with slender resources in his attempt to understand more about the lost city. He felt the most intriguing feature of the site, and the possible key to fulfilling José's prophecy, lay 2 kilometers from the palace, where there was a massive earth mound or tumulus. 110 meters long and 12 meters high, the sheer size of the mound made it unlike anything Andronicus had seen before. At first he was unable to predict what or who lay buried within it. From 1952 onwards, he returned to the mound in several campaigns of excavation. And in 1962, he dug this massive trench, in which he encountered the shattered fragments of gravestones, which dated to the 3rd century BC. They'd been deliberately smashed, but why? Perhaps they were the remains left behind by ancient tomb robbers. In 1976, more fragments were uncovered when another trench was dug. But this time they could be explained, for historians had now agreed that Vergina was in fact the site of the first Macedonian capital, called Aegaea, which they'd always thought lay further north at Edessa. A reference Andronicus knew from the writings of Plutarch made sense of the shattered gravestones, for it said that the royal cemetery at Aegaea had been destroyed in the 3rd century BC. It was a revelation. Andronicus now believed that he was digging in the graveyard of the Macedonian kings. As he swung further around the mound in 1977, he began to anticipate the discovery of something quite remarkable. Digging in and down, the soil began to change colour, indicating a smaller mound that had been covered by the great tumulus. In it they encountered blocks of dressed stone, and at last, after a 25-year search, the mound revealed its first tomb. But when the tomb was opened, they found that all its riches had been plundered, except one. Painted over 2,000 years ago, this mural depicts the abduction of Persephone by Pluto, god of the underworld. As the chariot thunders along, he heaves the panic-stricken goddess into his arms, while the 4 white horses are led hastily on by Hermes. Persephone, daughter of the corn goddess Demeter, was taken off by Pluto to the region where the souls of the dead resided. Seen in this burial context, the abduction is a symbol of the transition from life to death. The painting reflects a society which had a close acquaintance with Greek religion and the wealth to employ a great artist. Project artist Yorgos Miltsakakis spent a year working in the tomb to recreate the mural down to its finest brushstrokes. And what he observed about the painter's style helped Andronicus to identify the artist as the legendary Nicomachos.
We have information from a Latin writer named Plinius about the style of Nicomachos, about the technique he used, I mean the colors and other details. And also we know that Persephone's abduction was included to Nicomachos' repertoire. And Professor Andronikos thinks that Nicomachos must be responsible for this painting.
Adorned with classical art of such beauty, a tomb like this could only have been for Macedonian royalty. But could there be other tombs within the mound? By the winter of 1977, conditions for further work were getting harder. But Andronicus, still sensing he was close to a major discovery, pressed on. Finally, in the shadow of the huge